1995 NBC was peak television. You had Friends, Seinfeld, ER, Frasier, even Wings and Mad About You drew big numbers. But there's another show that tends to get forgotten despite being one of the sharpest of the bunch. That show is NewsRadio. It had snappy writing, breakout performances from comedy legends, critical acclaim, and a growing fan base. The potential was limitless, but then it collapsed. Now many fans point to the tragedy of Phil Hartman's passing, and obviously that was something the show couldn't recover from, and the blame game that followed on set was intense. I'll get into that. But the cracks started forming much earlier, and it's incredibly frustrating just how much bigger this show could have been had it not been essentially sabotaged. This is the sad and frustrating story of NewsRadio that most people don't know. Now before we start, give this video a like if you watched NewsRadio back in the day, and subscribe for more retro TV deep dives. Let's kick this off in 1993 with a man by the name of Paul Simms. Simms was a Harvard Lampoon alum who'd sharpened his teeth at Spy magazine before landing a writing job on HBO's The Larry Sanders Show, which was one of the most sophisticated comedies ever made. Simms was excelling there, eventually became an executive producer, and had an idea of his own. While researching for Larry Sanders, Simms had spent time inside a real New York AM news radio station, and what he found there stuck with him. It was organized chaos. You had egomaniacs reading copy on the air like they were delivering the Gettysburg Address. The staff was obsessed with conspiracies. There was a bizarre billionaire owner lurking around the edges. It was an ecosystem of talented but dysfunctional people that seemed put together on air, but was anything but. And Simms thought, that's a sitcom. And NBC agreed. He pitched the idea to them in 1994, and they said yes. Next up was casting, which was built more around chemistry than star power. I'm going to bookend this with the Canadians, starting with Dave Foley from Kids in the Hall fame, who you cannot convince me isn't Zooey Deschanel's dad. He was cast as Dave Nelson, the straight man news director tasked with trying to herd the most ungovernable cats in New York City. Maura Tierney was cast as Lisa Miller, the ambitious producer, and Dave's on-again, off-again love interest. Stephen Root, who I can't look at without saying, "Have you seen my stapler?" played Jimmy James, the eccentric billionaire owner who communicated exclusively in cryptic one-liners and conspiracy theories. Vicki Lewis was the deadpan secretary Beth. Fun fact, that role almost went to Sarah Silverman and Mary Lynn Ricecub. Andy Dick played Matthew Brock, the hapless, naive reporter who hero worshipped the station's anchor. And oh, the drama that revolved around him near the show's end. Just wait. Candy Alexander was cast as Catherine Duke, the no-nonsense co-anchor. And then there's Joe Girelli, the street-smart, conspiracy-obsessed electrician and handyman who was played by Joe Rogan. Crazy fact, the role was originally cast with Ray Romano. Romano showed up for the pilot, did 2 days of rehearsals, and was fired because he wasn't a good fit. The next year, he created Everybody Loves Raymond, which ran for 9 seasons, winning every award in sight. Does that happen if he stays on NewsRadio? Do we get the Joe Rogan podcast empire? Quite the butterfly effect there. Anyway, and now we bookend the cast with the other Canadian and their best casting decision, the one that would define the show, Phil Hartman. Hartman was on Saturday Night Live for 9 seasons and was a performer of almost supernatural range. His castmates would later call him the Glue because he held everything together. He was cast as Bill McNeil, WNYX's vain, self-important, scene-stealing anchor who treated every broadcast like his personal coronation and every conversation as an opportunity to remind you just how much better he was than you. While by all accounts the man himself couldn't have been more different from the character, kind, generous, collaborative, and professional to the core, this was the perfect role for Hartman's brand of comedy. NewsRadio premiered March 21st, 1995 on NBC Tuesday night at 8:30 as a mid-season replacement. The pilot introduced the WNYX staff in full chaos. Dave trying to establish authority he doesn't have, Bill delivering the news like he's accepting an Oscar, Jimmy arriving with a business philosophy that makes no coherent sense, Matthew causing low-grade disasters in every scene. It was beautiful chaos, just as creator Paul Simms envisioned. And from the very first episode, critics knew they were watching something special. The New York Times praised it immediately. Critics across the board called it one of the smartest debuts of the season. A precocious, rule-breaking workplace comedy that didn't need to explain its jokes or wrap everything up neatly. But as we all know, success isn't determined by the critics, it's determined by the viewers at home. And the ratings were, just okay. It got 11.4 million viewers per week on average, finishing as the 39th ranked show in America. Season 2, which would be the show's first full season, would be the real test, and the writers swung for the fences. That season produced some of the most genuinely weird, inventive sitcom episodes of the decade. For example, one episode titled The Injury used the word penis repeatedly as a legitimate medical term in the proper context. Still, NBC censors tucked it away for 6 months before finally airing the episode late in the season with a rare parental discretion warning. And the chemistry you saw on screen was reflective of what was happening backstage. At this point, keep watching the video to see why this is a spoiler alert, the cast genuinely liked each other and were having the time of their professional lives. Which brings us to the infamous SAG Awards incident. The cast attended together and decided they could do whatever they wanted. By multiple accounts, they took their shoes off during the ceremony, they stole wine from other tables, they behaved, in the words of the cast members themselves, like animals. And legend has it they were unofficially banned from the SAG Awards for life, which is kind of legendary. But this is where the good times ended, because what happened during season 2 would set the course for the show's rapid collapse. NBC started playing musical chairs with their time slot. Right as the show was building momentum, after the 10th episode, the network moved the show from Tuesday 8:30, right after Wings, to the much tougher Sunday 8:30 slot. How did Paul Simms and the cast feel about it? Well, they felt like the network was actually undermining them. But they hadn't seen nothing yet. Get a load of this. In season 3, NBC moved the show to Wednesday at 9, then to Thursday at 8:30, then to Wednesday 8 p.m., then to Wednesday 8:30 for one episode, and finally landed back on Thursday. And despite critics still raving about the show, the ratings collapsed. The show fell from 39th to 92nd place, pretty much near the bottom of the pack, and Paul Simms went scorched earth. He went to Rolling Stone magazine in April 1997 and unloaded. He called the constant time slot changes insane and accused NBC scheduling head Preston Beckman of hating the show, bad-mouthing it, and actively sabotaging it. And maybe that scorched earth approach helped a bit, because in season 4, the show only shifted 3 times and, wouldn't you know it, climbed back up to 62nd place. But what happened on May 28, 1998 was a tragedy that the show couldn't recover from. Phil Hartman was murdered in his home by his wife Bryn, who then turned the gun on herself. She had struggled with substance abuse for years, and it was devastating. I was a teenager back then, and I still remember it. Obviously, the cast and crew were destroyed, and NBC and Paul Simms faced an impossible decision. Do you cancel the show, end it as a tribute, or do you come back, honor the man, and try to keep going? Well, they decided to come back. And Jon Lovitz, one of Hartman's closest friends from their time together on SNL, was asked to join the cast as a replacement character. Simms told him directly, "You're his friend, it feels right, and everyone in the cast wants you here." Lovitz, in his honor, said yes. The season 5 premiere, Bill Moves On, aired September 23, 1998, one day before what would have been Phil Hartman's 50th birthday. And it was one of the most poignant pieces of television that year. The staff returns from Bill's off-screen funeral, and nobody explains it, nobody eulogizes it for the audience, nobody makes a speech. A Radio Ink magazine cover featuring Hartman sits quietly on Dave's desk as a silent tribute. But this wasn't a finale. There was still a lot of show to go. And maybe with Jon Lovitz in tow, who was hilarious, there was a future for NewsRadio. But remember how I said the cast got along? Well, after Phil Hartman's murder, a unique and very painful tension was building. There had been a story circulating about a 1997 Christmas party where Andy Dick had allegedly reintroduced cocaine to Bryn Hartman, who had been trying to get clean. The story became public and Jon Lovitz believed it. On the NewsRadio set, Lovitz looked at Andy Dick and said out loud in front of the whole cast, "I wouldn't be here if you hadn't given Bryn that cocaine." And you know that tension never went away, because in 2007, years after the show ended, Lovitz ran into Dick at the Laugh Factory and smashed his head into the brass rail on the bar. So in a situation where the whole cast was already grieving, this tension just made everything that much heavier. Now the cast navigated it professionally, the show went on, ratings improved slightly from 8 million in season 4 to 9.6 million in season 5, but the show finished 72nd in the country. NBC kept shifting it around, and when it was all said and done, it was just too heavy for everyone to continue. The series ended May 4th, 1999, with an episode called New Hampshire. 5 seasons, 97 episodes, and countless what-ifs. The show had 11 time slots during its 5-year run. It tragically lost its star, and it never cracked the top 30 while it was on the air. But the show lived on. Reruns on Nick at Night, TBS, and Antenna TV introduced it to a whole new generation. Then, of course, DVDs and streaming did the rest. And it survived again because of its quality. Critics and retrospectives called it the red-headed stepchild of must-see TV and one of the sharpest workplace comedies ever made. It was ahead of its time, and you can see its DNA in the workplace comedies that followed: The Office, 30 Rock, and Parks and Recreation. Critics and historians often point to NewsRadio as a stylistic ancestor. And also, a lot of cast members went on to great things. Dave Foley appeared in countless shows and movies, both on camera and as a voice actor. Maura Tierney became a drama powerhouse on ER and The Affair. Stephen Root became a cult legend in Office Space and appeared in a ton of other TV shows and movies. And Joe Rogan, well, Joe Rogan became Joe Rogan, building a podcast empire that reaches millions every week. And while Phil Hartman never got the official recognition he deserved for Bill McNeil, other than a posthumous Emmy nomination, he finished his legendary career with one of the great comedic performances of the 1990s. And really, that's NewsRadio in a nutshell. Stellar performances, underrated in its time, but loved to this day, and worth the deep dive. Thanks for watching.